Hi, I'm Jonathon Kappy.
And I'm Rebecca Rauws.
Welcome to Holland Estates. You're listening to episode number 558. And today we will be discussing the decision of Fica and Dmytryshyn, a decision of Justice Perel. How you doing, Rebecca?
Good, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. This decision I really like. It's not a long decision.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of law per se, but it's an interesting set of facts, and I like what His Honor has done with the facts of this case and how he's presented it, and in a colorful manner.
I agree, very colorful.
Justice Perel can write some amazing decisions. The opening line of this decision starts with, in this taking of account, the jealous son sues his desirous and spoiled young brother and his beleaguered and over-his-head uncle about the spoils of the estate of his late mother. So, an interesting read for sure.
Yeah, so I guess I'll go into the facts a little bit. So at the core of this decision, I think, is two brothers. So the deceased was Nadia, and she was the mother of these two sons, Brian and Terrace. It seemed like she favored the one son, Terrace, and supported him financially for most of his life. Brian was more independent. He kind of went off on his own, did his own thing, was not in connection with his family for 15 years or so at one point, and he didn't receive that kind of financial support that his brother did.
Yeah, I think you see that a lot, and certainly in my practice, where oftentimes you'll have one child that's closer with the parent, particularly when there's only one parent, and another child who is more independent. I think in this particular case, Brian was significantly older than Terrace. At least 10 years older,
yeah.
I think.
I think you're right.
And it happens naturally, but in this particular case, this is taken to an extreme. And if you look at the way Justice Perel describes it, is that Nadia indulged and favored Terrace over Brian, and that he was needy. And he made bad decisions, and nonetheless, she supported those bad decisions and played on those bad decisions.
Yeah.
So
he was irresponsible, and as a result, he needed more money, and she gave him more money, and then the cycle continued.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so that really upset Brian. But as we'll get into it, the judge said that was Mom's decision to make.
Right. So Mom died in 2012, but before she died, she'd been quite sick with lymphoma for the better part of that year. During that time, the one son, Taras, and also her brother, Uncle Ned, acted as her attorneys. When she died, they also were her named estate trustees, so they proceeded with administering the estate. The beneficiaries of the estate were Uncle Ned, Taras, and Brian, the two brothers. And
well, I'm not sure that Brian was an estate trustee.
No, sorry, beneficiaries. Sorry if I said estate trustee. I meant beneficiaries. So they were the beneficiaries. And so Brian started making demands for information about the estate and about what happened when they were acting as attorneys for Nadia. And initially, Taras and Uncle Ned were resistant to that. They didn't want to give him the information or an accounting because it would cost too much. So they said if he would pay for it, they would do it, but otherwise, no.
So, and I think that's really sort of where we get into it. Listen, there was, according to Justice Perel, Terrace was an unworthy spendthrift, or the words right out of the decision. But Nadia was competent to make those decisions, and she indulged it. And then the issue became, Brian had all these concerns about certain spending, particularly at the end of her life, and he wanted an accounting. He alleged that this had all been misappropriated by Terrace and by the uncle, and he wanted those monies to be returned to the estate in which he was going to share. Right. And the issue was, do they have to account? Should they have accounted? And ultimately, it becomes a cost issue.
Right. So, the result in terms of the passing of accounts isn't really the most interesting part of this decision. Ultimately, the court found that all the payments were voluntary by Nadia, and she wanted to make those payments, and there was no undue influence, and that was fine. But then when it came to the cost decision, as you mentioned, because of this resistance to account, Uncle Ned and Taras didn't comply with the rules of civil procedure, and so as a result, they didn't get to recover their costs in this case.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, what the judge is saying is, no matter whether or not this beneficiary, Brian, who was complaining, was right or wrong, you as the estate trustees, as the fiduciaries, have an obligation under the rules to account.
Yep.
And whether you think it's frivolous or not, you have to go through that process.
Yep.
And if you don't go through that process, then you are partly to blame for what falls out of that. And so even if you think those objections are going to be frivolous, you got to do the accounting.
Yeah. You have to go through the motions.
You have to indulge it. And when you talk about people coming in, and I always think that you have a right as a beneficiary to make reasonable inquiries. There are certain things as the outside person looking in you don't know, and it may have a simple answer, you simply don't know.
Yeah.
And I think the court gives you the benefit of the doubt to make those reasonable inquiries until you should know, all right, you've asked your questions, they've been answered, now give it up.
Yeah.
And I think what Justice Perel is saying is that in that respect, well, with respect to the allegations, he was wrong, but he was allowed to make those inquiries. He was allowed to get that level of transparency to at least so he should know that, okay, I should back off now.
Right.
And I think that's why Justice Perel said, well, you're not going to recover your costs on that because you were wrong in that respect.
Yeah.
So in terms of the facts of the case, I'm happy with the way it played out.
Yeah, I agree, yeah.
And I think that Justice Perel was pretty firm in terms of, Brian, listen, Mom can spend her money any way she wants. At the end of the day, it's her money.
Yeah.
And as long as she was capable, there was no undue influence. This is what she wanted, and the court was not going to change that. But as an estate trustee, as a fiduciary,
they still had that obligation.
You have to do that. So an interesting read, and definitely colorful writing by Justice Perel, a worthy read.
Yes, definitely.
But I think that concludes our podcast. Until next time, we want to thank you for listening. I'm Jonathon Kappy.
I'm Rebecca Rauws.
Should you have any questions, please email us at webmaster@hollandhall.com or leave us a comment on our blog.